He came home at 2 a.m. and found his maid sleeping on the floor. No bed, no pillow. Just a thin blanket folded in half and pressed against her chest were two babies that were not hers. Two babies that her employer's wife had walked away from 6 weeks after they were born. No goodbye, no explanation. Just two Louis Vuitton suitcases and a woman who had decided motherhood didn't fit her lifestyle. James Willis was a millionaire. He owned 4 companies, a mansion, and everything money could buy. But standing in that doorway, watching Ciara Thomas sleep on a hardwood floor with his children in her arms, children she had no obligation to love, no audience to perform for, no reason to sacrifice herself for, he realized something that no amount of money had ever taught him. You could pay someone to show up. You cannot pay someone to stay. And this woman had chosen the floor. What happened next changed everything. But it wasn't James who uncovered the whole truth. It was his mother, Patricia, and when she did, nothing in that house would ever be the same again. Welcome to Kindness Arena. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and unseen connections that change lives, please help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers. Help me show her that stories like this matter and deserve to be heard by hitting the subscribe button, liking the video, comment your thoughts, where you are watching from, and share it with someone who needs it to stay motivated. Your support keeps these powerful, true stories alive. The mansion at Willowcrest Drive never slept quietly. Even at 2 in the morning, the security lights hummed, the fountain in the courtyard murmured, and the grandfather clock in the east hallway marked every quarter hour with the kind of authority that only old money could afford. James Willis had grown used to all of it, the sounds of a home that had everything except warmth. He had returned from London 3 days early. No announcement, no fanfare. His business deal had collapsed faster than expected, and honestly, he hadn't wanted to sit alone in a 5-star hotel room pretending that the silence there felt any different from the silence here. At least here, the silence was his own. He loosened his tie as his car rolled through the iron gates. His driver, old Mr. Beckett, said nothing. He never did. It was one of the reasons James kept him on. The house was dark except for a dim light leaking from under the nursery door at the end of the 2nd-floor corridor. James paused. He hadn't been inside that room in 4 months. Not since Martha left. Not since the day his wife of 3 years had packed 2 Louis Vuitton suitcases, stepped over the threshold of this very house, and declared, with a coolness that still made his chest tighten, that she wasn't built for this kind of life. She had waved her hand vaguely as she said it, a gesture that seemed to encompass the house, the marriage, and the 2 infant children sleeping upstairs, Elijah and Eden, 7 months old. Martha's children by blood, his children by every definition that actually mattered. James hadn't planned on children, but the moment the nurse had placed Elijah in his arms in that hospital room, something cracked open in him that no amount of business success had ever touched. And Eden had looked at him with those enormous dark eyes like she already knew everything about the world and had decided to trust him anyway. Martha had looked at them differently, like a woman staring at a problem she hadn't budgeted for. She was gone 6 weeks after they came home from the hospital. He had hired Ciara Thomas 2 weeks after that. Ciara had come to him through an agency, quiet, professional, references impeccable. 26 years old, from a small town in Georgia, with a voice that was soft but never uncertain. She had walked into the interview with sensible shoes and a notepad, and when James had warned her that the twins were difficult and that he worked long hours and that, frankly, the household was in a period of adjustment, she had looked at him with calm brown eyes and said, "I understand. I'm very good with difficulties." She had meant the babies, of course, but James had wondered, just briefly, if she had meant him too. He had never been an unkind employer, but he had not been a particularly present one either. He paid generously, respected boundaries, and largely stayed out of her way. He told himself this was professionalism. His mother had once told him it was fear of letting anyone close enough to leave again. He had not responded to that because Patricia Willis had an irritating habit of being right. Now he stood in the hallway at 2:15 in the morning, his leather shoes silent on the hardwood, and pushed open the nursery door. What he saw stopped him completely. The room was softly lit by the starlight projector he had bought on a whim from a baby catalog. tiny constellations drifting slowly across the ceiling in pale blue and gold. Both cribs were empty. On the floor, between the two cribs, Ciara Thomas lay asleep on a thin blanket she had folded in half to make it slightly less inadequate. She was curled on her side, one arm extended. Elijah was tucked against her chest, one fat fist clutching the fabric of her shirt. Eden was nestled against her back, little legs pulled up, utterly peaceful. All three of them were breathing in almost perfect synchrony. James stood in the doorway for a long time. There was a perfectly good nursing chair 3 feet away. There was a cot in the adjoining room that the agency had set up for overnight care. There was, by every practical measure, no reason for Ciara to be on the floor, except that both babies were in her arms. He pieced it together quietly, the way he assembled information in boardrooms. Elijah must have cried. She had taken him out of the crib to settle him. Then Eden had stirred, as Eden always did when her brother was upset. They had some invisible thread between them, those two. And rather than put one down and risk waking the other, Ciara had simply lowered herself to the floor. Held them both. Stayed. He didn't know how long she had been there. Long enough for all three of them to fall into a deep sleep. Long enough for her hip to be pressing against the hardwood floor with nothing but a folded blanket between her and the cold. James Willis had negotiated contracts worth 9 figures. He had sat across from men who ran governments. He had walked through rooms full of people who wanted something from him, and he had learned very early how to read the difference between performance and truth. What he was looking at was the truth. This woman who owed these children nothing beyond the terms of her employment, who could have put them both down and climbed into the cot in the next room, who had no audience and no reason to perform, had chosen the floor. He walked quietly to the linen closet in the hallway. He found the warmest blanket he could, a heavy cream-colored throw that Martha had bought for aesthetic purposes and never once used. He came back into the nursery and gently, carefully, draped it over Ciara without disturbing her or the twins. She stirred slightly. Her eyes opened, just barely, confused and soft with sleep. "Mr. Willis?" she whispered. "Go back to sleep," he said quietly. "I'll take the monitor." She looked at him for a moment, still half dreaming. Then, apparently deciding this was acceptable, she closed her eyes. He sat in the nursing chair for the rest of the night. In the morning, Ciara was mortified. She was already up and dressed when he came downstairs, the twins fed and in their bouncy seats in the kitchen, 2 cups of coffee on the counter. Her expression was carefully professional, but her jaw was tight. "I apologize, Mr. Willis. That was completely unprofessional. I should have." "How often does that happen?" he asked. She stopped. "Sir." "The floor. How often are you on the floor with them?" She hesitated. A careful woman. When they both need settling at the same time, it's sometimes easier. Easier than the cot in the side room. Another pause. "If I put one of them in the cot and go back to the other, sometimes they can hear each other and it takes longer to settle them. If I stay between them, they calm faster. They seem to feel that someone is in the middle." James looked at his coffee. "You could have told me. I would have arranged something better. You were in London. I have a phone." Ciara looked at him steadily. "You have a company to run, Mr. Willis. I have 2 babies to care for. Those are our respective responsibilities. I didn't see the need to report that I'd found a method that works." He almost smiled. He didn't quite get there, but it was close. "I'm buying a floor mattress today," he said. "A proper one. For the nursery." She blinked. "That's not necessary." "It's not for you," he said. "It's for my house. It will be there in case it's needed." She understood, then, that he was giving her a way to accept it without it being charity. She nodded once. "Thank you, Mr. Willis." "James," he said. He wasn't entirely sure why. She looked at him carefully. "James," she repeated, like she was testing the weight of it. Eden chose that moment to blow an enthusiastic raspberry from her bouncy seat. Both of them looked at her, and this time he did smile. Patricia Willis arrived on a Tuesday, as she always did, unannounced, impeccably dressed, and radiating the particular energy of a woman who had survived 68 years of life entirely on her own terms. She swept into the kitchen, kissed her son on the cheek, assessed the room in approximately 4 seconds, and turned to look at Ciara, who was feeding Eden at the kitchen table. "You must be the girl who's been keeping this household alive," Patricia said. "Ciara Thomas, ma'am." Ciara looked up, perfectly composed. Patricia sat down across from her, completely ignoring James, and watched Ciara feed Eden with the focused attention of a woman conducting a serious evaluation. Eden, for her part, grabbed Ciara's finger and refused to let go. "How long have you been on the floor?" Patricia asked. Ciara went still. "Ma'am, your right hip. You're favoring it slightly. How long have you been sleeping on the floor with them?" Ciara glanced at James. He shrugged, just barely. "A few months," Ciara said carefully. Patricia nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something she had already decided. She reached over and tickled Elijah under his chin, and he broke into the enormous, gummy grin that he reserved for people he had immediately decided to love. "He has James's eyes," Patricia said softly. "He always looked at me like that, too. Like he was surprised the world was so interesting." She sat back. "Those children are lucky to have you." "I'm lucky to have them," Ciara said, and it was so simply, plainly true that no one in the room felt the need to respond to it. Later, Patricia found James in his study. She closed the door, sat across from his desk, folded her hands, and looked at him the way she had been looking at him since he was 7 years old and trying to hide something. "Tell me about Martha," she said. He told her. All of it. Things he hadn't told anyone. Things he'd been carrying alone for 4 months. The way Martha had grown distant during the pregnancy. The way she had looked at the twins in the hospital like she was looking at someone else's life. The way she had left without a single backward glance, signed away any claim with the efficiency of a woman closing a business account, and had not once called to ask about Elijah or Eden. Patricia listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Martha didn't abandon your children because she was a bad person," Patricia said finally. "She abandoned them because she was dishonest. She knew before she married you that she didn't want this life. She simply believed she could want it if she tried hard enough. That is a very different kind of cruelty, the kind people do to themselves that ends up landing on everyone around them." James said nothing. "And you," Patricia continued, "have been punishing yourself ever since. Telling yourself you should have seen it, that you should have known. Shouldn't I have? You loved her. Love is not a diagnostic tool, James." She paused. "But I'll tell you what I do know. I have been watching that young woman in your kitchen for 3 hours. I have watched her anticipate what Elijah needs before he cries. I have watched her sing to Eden under her breath while she thinks no one is listening. I have watched her look at those babies the way a person looks at something they would walk through fire for." Patricia met his eyes. "And I have watched you watch her." The room was very quiet. "She works for me," James said. "She does," Patricia agreed. "And that is a circumstance, not a verdict." She stood, smoothed her jacket. "I'm not telling you to do anything rash. I'm telling you not to be a fool. The heart does not knock twice, James. Not with that kind of certainty." She picked up her bag. "Also," she added, "buy that girl a proper bed for the nursery and a raise. Immediately, if you haven't done so already. I ordered the mattress yesterday." Patricia paused at the door and looked back at him with something that was almost not quite a smile. "Good. You're not entirely hopeless." 6 months later, the nursery had a proper floor mattress, thick and cushioned, with fitted sheets that Ciara had chosen herself in a soft yellow print. She had stopped apologizing for using it. James had made it clear, quietly and without drama, that whatever method kept his children happy and his household at peace was not something that required justification. The twins had grown into opinionated, joyful, endlessly surprising small people. Elijah had developed a deep personal relationship with the family dog, a golden retriever named Duke, and spent most of his time trying to share his food with him. Eden had developed a habit of studying faces, watching eyes with a patience and intelligence that made everyone she looked at feel, somehow, both seen and gently examined. Martha sent a card at Christmas. James read it, set it aside, and did not respond. There was nothing cruel in that decision. There was simply nothing to say. Patricia came every Tuesday. She had appointed herself an unofficial grandmother with a thoroughness that left no room for argument and which no one, including James, had any interest in arguing against. She and Ciara had developed a friendship that operated on the currency of honesty and excellent tea, in which James suspected was, in some gentle and inexorable way, conspiring to make him a better man. Things between him and Ciara moved the way real things move, slowly, uncertainly, with a great deal of unspoken conversation that happened in shared glances over the twins' heads and in the particular quality of silence between two people who have begun to trust each other. There was no dramatic declaration, no single moment that rewrote everything. There was just a Tuesday evening when Patricia had taken the twins for the night, and James had made dinner badly, sincerely, and Ciara had sat across from him and laughed for the first time in a way that was entirely free of professionalism. And in that laughter, something settled into place. He didn't know yet exactly what shape the future would take. But he knew this. The woman who had chosen the cold floor over putting those babies down was not a woman he was capable of not loving. He had known it that first night, standing in the starlight of a quiet nursery with a blanket in his hands. He had simply needed time to trust what he knew. Outside, the fountain in the courtyard murmured. The grandfather clock ticked. The house settled around them with the particular contentment of a place that has at last begun to understand what warmth is. And somewhere down the corridor, Elijah and Eden slept deeply, peacefully, held even in their dreams by the certainty that they were wanted, that they were chosen, that no matter what had been left behind, what stood ahead was this, a floor that no one had to sleep on alone anymore, in a home that was slowly, undeniably learning to mean it. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness is never wasted and that even a broken path can lead to beautiful places and change of lives, please like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Kindness Arena because your support keeps stories like this alive and spreading. Tell us in the comment what you would have done differently if you were CEO. Would you have replied to the letter? Or has a stranger's kindness ever changed your life in ways you didn't expect? We'd love to hear your story.